Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Wednesday, December the 29th, 2021. I apologize for my absence for Monday and Tuesday, but it was rather out of my hands. I'll get to that in just a minute. I have some breaking news here. This is from Rebecca Rosenberg and Marta Danis at Fox News. British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell faces up to 65 years in prison after a Manhattan jury found her guilty of 5 of 6 counts against her for trafficking teens to be abused by her and late pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. A unanimous jury has found Ghislaine Maxwell guilty of one of the worst crimes imaginable, facilitating and participating in the sexual abuse of children, said U.S. Attorney for the Southern District Damian Williams. Crimes that she committed with her longtime partner and co-conspirator, Jeffrey Epstein. The road to justice has been far too long, but today, justice has been done. The jury acquitted on a single count, enticement of an individual under the age of 17 to travel with intent to engage in illegal sexual activity. So, back to the cold. I was thinking about, I've had this song in my head for the last few days. That happens to me. Well, there's rarely a time when I don't realize that I've got some sort of song or piece of music going on in my head. But for the last few days, it's been a song by the American band Little Feat from their second record, their best, I think, called Salem Shoes. That was the last record they made with the original lineup. It's written by Lowell George, who founded the band and wrote most of the songs and produced the records. And he disbanded the band in 1979 because it had been taken away from him, hijacked from him to become a jazz funk vehicle, which is not what he wanted to do. Anyway, the song is called Cold, Cold, Cold. And let's look at some of the lyrics here. Cold, 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 freezing. It was freezing in that hotel. I called room service. I'm down here on my knees. A peach or a pear or a coconut, please. But they was cold. Now, of course, there's no room service in this hotel, and even the Coke machines don't work. The ice machine doesn't work. Let's see. Yes, I'm mixed up. I'm so mixed up. Don't you know I'm lonely? And I wish the world get off of my case and get on one of its own. We've had record low temperatures here in Victoria and across the strait in Vancouver. Now, these aren't record, it doesn't seem all that cold to most people in the United States, but shockingly so for people in my part of the world. I have lived in cold places. I lived in Sudbury, Ontario when I was a child, and I spent 5 years in Edmonton as an adult. Now, nowhere near as cold as that, but still cold. It was 16 degrees Fahrenheit, yesterday, with a wind of, about 10 miles an hour gusting to about 20. So that is to say, felt like it was about 8 or 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Victoria and Vancouver, for that matter, they don't really handle the snow very well. It's really kind of embarrassing and funny, actually. It snows here in Victoria for about a week a year minimum. Back in 2017, we had about 3 weeks of it in March. But snow etiquette here is bad. Few people or businesses shovel the sidewalk. Few put salt to melt it, with the result that the snow gets tamped down and then it turns into ice. And my walk to save on foods this morning took about 60-70% longer than usual because I found myself exercising all of these muscles in the lower half of my body, which I normally don't, in an effort, not to crash onto the ground and smack my head. It's also amusing to watch the drivers The same in Victoria as in Vancouver. So many of them become frustrated because they're not getting much traction. So what do? They mash the gas pedal. If there's ever any kind of significant snowstorm in Vancouver or Victoria, within an hour or two of it starting, you will see many cars abandoned at the side of the road. So why was it so cold in this hotel? Well, because the heat wasn't working. I don't know how long the heat has been off, okay? Because I'm not one to like a what seems to me excessively warm room. So, put on a sweater or whatever, as they say. But no, the last, since Christmas Day, just absolutely unbearable. And after, I don't know, about a day and a half, I went down to the front desk to complain, only to be informed that we are not being provided with heat anymore in this hotel. And that if I wanted heat, I could buy a heater. That was a new one to me, and I thought, that's not legal, right? Someone sent me on Twitter Victoria City bylaws. Apparently, it is not legal. But what does that mean anyway? What are the consequences of breaking that bylaw? Oh, we're getting another huge dump of snow tomorrow, which means that I don't know how many people are going to be going out for New Year's Eve, or expect a great many more crashes. Also, pedestrians, as I say, slipping and smashing their heads on the sidewalks. Here's a story from Karen Larson of CBC News, which is in no way related to my own circumstance. Vancouver SRO tenants have been without heat since Christmas Day. Residents of the rundown Regal Hotel on Granville Street are among the city's most vulnerable. About half the residents of the Regal Hotel in Vancouver are bracing for a fourth consecutive night without heat Tuesday, with the outside temperature and wind chill values expected to drop to minus 20 degrees Celsius in the city. The heat first went out at the single resident occupancy hotel on Christmas Day, according to multiple sources, leaving many vulnerable tenants suffering in the bitter cold. On Tuesday afternoon, a person who lives and works at the Regal told CBC some repairs had been made, but that heat was coming back for only half of the 80 units in the 110-year-old building at 1046 Granville Street. I'm scared for the other residents, said the person. A lot of people don't really want to say anything because they've been asked not to. Victoria Desroches has a friend who lives at the Regal and is recovering from major surgery. She said another night of freezing temperatures could prove fatal for him. I'm terrified, she said. He's not a young man, and to dispel some of the typical myths, he's not someone who's a drug abuser. He's just a man on disability. He pays $750 for a room with no bathroom, and he just needs to get well. How do you do that when it's below zero and you have no heat? The Regal Hotel is owned by the Sahota family, notorious for operating decrepit SROs in Vancouver. Desroches said the City of Vancouver staffer confirmed that city officials knew about the Regal Hotel heat problem on Christmas Day, but that no action was taken until December the 27th, after she began contacting media outlets with the story. She said, given the Sahota's record, city officials should have acted sooner. More on the Sahotas in just a minute. But okay, so I couldn't stand it anymore yesterday morning. I had been spending most of my time in bed, fully clothed, with the covers up to my chin. But who wants to live like that? So I took a bus into the wilds of Saanich to Home Depot, and my word, that place is large. It's like an aircraft hangar. And I managed to find an electric heater that wasn't an oil heater, had been suggested to me by a kind soul on Twitter. But I had to take it back on the bus, and the sidewalks and crossing the street, one needs arms, or at least one arm for balance. And so now I wanted something portable. You can see it there in the background. The Sentinel, I call it. But okay, so given all the computer stuff here, there's not a lot of outlets left. One, in fact, underneath the desk there, where the desk lamp is next to the bed, or the nightstand lamp. So that took some doing, getting it in there, but I did. And I don't know, a few minutes later, I thought, well, I want some tea. And I make tea here by heating the water in the microwave. And as soon as I turned on the microwave, it blew out the power for at least half of this floor. And yes, I know that this whole structure is underpowered. I'm afraid to use the hairdryer because last time I did, it once again threw out all the power. And I know that someone else on this floor is using a heater, and this fellow was admonished by management not to turn on the microwave if you had the heater on. But here's the strange thing. I've come to the hypothesis that the boiler must have stopped working and they don't want to pay to have it repaired because this is the hotel's electricity that I'm using here. And it would probably be cheaper, in terms of, quotidian demand to have the boiler working. But no, I've got this little machine charging away furiously about 20 hours a day. It took about 8 hours after I plugged the thing in for the first time for the temperature in the room to become tolerable. And I use tolerable advisedly. But let's have more on the Sahotas. I have to be very careful what I say about this family because this is Canada. This is British Columbia, and one wouldn't want to be accused of being racist. This is from a site called Vancouver is Awesome in 2018. Notorious Vancouver slumlords linked to Burnaby rental shell game. An expose by Wendy Stuick and Mike Hager in the Globe and Mail from May 2018. And look, these are just pictures I'm looking at of the Regent Hotel, and they make me want to vomit. I'm not joking. The whole thing, just one can imagine the stench. The whole places are falling apart. All this talk about rats falling through holes in the ceiling and landing in the tub. And I believe the Sahotas have had 2 properties in Vancouver seized by eminent domain, but they still own others, including the Regent. And again, one doesn't want to be accused of being racist because that is the very worst thing in the world, as everyone knows. Let's have a look at the chat. Hello to Anran, Chogokin 666, Dan, Palpicasso 88. Dan says we're having a heat wave. Matt Forney, hello, Matt, says Kevin lives in one of those real Soviet hotels that a bald and bankrupt is always touring. Anran says, Kevin, isn't Roald Amundsen one of your great heroes? How do you think he'd handle a 40 to 45 degree hotel room? R.F. Scott and his men would certainly already be dead. Yes, okay, touche. But the fact is, Amundsen wasn't doing much in the way of a keyboard navigating, or moving a trackball, that sort of thing. Hello to Palpicasso 88. Anran says, if you're still interested, Andrew Branca just posted a great piece at Legal Insurrection explaining the great injustice of the Kim Potter verdict. Hello to Dawn from Beyond. Chokin 666 says, how diabolically genius of the elite to create another vector of social friction as if we hadn't had enough masked fights. Dr. Deadname says, build a bonfire out of the extra furniture. I've had people, I've had talks with people who lived in this building for long periods of time, and they said that it's not a good idea to get on the wrong side of management because, as the old, the old English saying, they take it out of you in other ways. Okay. No heat, no cleaning, no room service, but they do have TV. Yes, they do. And of course, the computer downstairs in the main floor. Not that I need it. That's not working either. The hallways are vacuumed once a week, once a fortnight. The stairs don't appear to have been vacuumed for months. There is a distressed towel leaning against the door next to the stairway. There's a bunch of mattresses which are stuck up against the wall. Yes, decrepit. Hello to John Hare. So Maxwell was found guilty. Sorry, late arriving today. What are the implications? Read the cabal. I can't say, because the informed opinion seemed to be that, oh no, the prosecution was deliberately botching the case. Well, it seems to have been good enough, but of course there's always the avenue of appeal. Matt Forney says, sounds like Yerevan, which gets a lot of snow, but nobody ever shovels, managed to crack my head walking back from the Armenian Genocide Memorial. Even where there's an effort made, I mean, there's only so much that can be done if there's a lot of snow. In Edmonton, I just figured that I was going to take a fall every single year. I'll tell you a story about Edmonton. Shortly after I moved there, I was working on a Sunday, and there was something that I wanted, which was a pair of portable speakers for my Walkman, because I don't like listening to things on headphones. And I was living temporarily at my boss's house, and of course the speakers were kind of problematic because he and his wife went to bed at 8 p.m. in the evening, and I called it the monastery. But if I turned it down very, very quietly. Anyway, I learned a lesson about traveling by bus in Edmonton, which is essentially don't, unless you are, crossing one side of the river to the other. You can find yourself waiting a long, long time. And I found myself waiting at a bus stop for about 40 minutes. And I just moved there, and I didn't have the proper clothing to protect myself. And I thought I was going to start wailing in pain. So I had to take a bus, to a Radio Shack or some such, all the way across town. And I got there. They had the speakers. Then I had to take an enormously long bus ride back. Edmonton is an enormous city. I mean, it's not as big as Surrey, but it's just shocking how big it is. Anyway, so I get back, and it's been an ordeal. Oh, but I missed the best part. This Londonderry Mall, where the Radio Shack was, no pedestrian access to it. No pedestrian access. I'm not joking. So they had this landscaped area with these fake hills. So I thought, I'm going to have to traverse that. So as I was walking down one of these little mounds, of course, my feet flew up in front of me, went flying in the air, and then bam, on the ground, on my back. And all the papers that I'd been holding in my hands, they flew out of my hands, and I could see them fluttering to the ground. And then I started shaking my fist and swearing foully for a very, very long time, and very dire things I said about Edmonton itself, but in Edmonton, there's no getting away from it. And I've seen the same thing in Calgary. I haven't spent very much time in Calgary, but there's a condition that happens that things start melting. And so you get this toxic goo of melted snow and sand and salt. And there's always one big freeze, one final freeze. You think it's all over. And then it's typically around Easter, a huge snow dump, and everything freezes. And so the goo freezes, and walking on the sidewalks is it's quite an experience. Palpicasso 88, I'll just answer your question with a yes. Okay. Matt Forney says, I cracked my head and pulled a Charlie horse. Amazingly didn't get a concussion. John Hare says, how in the holy hell can a hotel not provide heat? How can they say, presumably with a straight face, that this is not included? This is idiocracy. Chokokin666 says, coldest place on earth is Yablonsk in Siberia. Pleased to be giving you hypothermia. John Hare. I thought Canada was supposed to be the greatest hotel on earth. This is embarrassing. Jan Martel, who wrote that book, was just given some bauble by the Canadian government. KMG's ordeal reminds me of John Dolan's essay, Canada Was a Cakewalk, where he talks about him and his wife ended up dead broke living on a houseboat in Victoria during an ice-cold winter. Ayn Rand says another day in KMG will look like Nicholson at the end of The Shining. John Harris says, BMW, I'm British American, had to temporarily change my Google profile name yesterday and then forgot to change it back just in case anyone is confused. Metal Mike says, time to find another place to live. Well, no, I have to get out of here entirely and I have to find an apartment or shared accommodation. I've been living with a couple of breaks. I've been living in hotels since April the 7th of last year. Okay, hello to Red Sulphur and Oscar Toe, John S. Thank you for your kind words. Kevin, will you do a New Year's Eve extravaganza like last year? What did I do last year? Did I do something special? Did I get embarrassingly squiffy? Okay. What else? Who else do we have here? You are now entering Free Dairy Mall, Chogokin 666. That's good. I like that. Who adds, no one has cleaned our hallways in over 10 years, but my rent was recently lowered to a ridiculously low amount. Hello to Susan Costanza. And when it snows in New York City, everyone thinks there's a moratorium on cleaning up your dog marriage, says Chogokin 666. Yes, I'm getting out. I'm getting out. The rental market is rather quiescent at this time of year. But no, well, the 15th or the 31st of next month, that's like a necessity. That's a necessity. Hello to Pete Ferguson. Caught COVID again today. It's rampaging through my family, and the sentiment has turned against the vax regime completely. Okay, let's move on here. And, oh, yes. So, I've never watched Sex in the City because I'm neither a woman nor a homosexual. But, of course, it is or was important to the culture. And so they have this half-assed reboot that doesn't have Samantha in it. And it is ever so woke. And, oh, yes, the Nixon character who became a lesbian, arguably the best looking of the women. She became a lesbian at 50 or something. And take a look at her wife on Google image search. It's not always like that, but so often to make it a cliche. It's quite amusing, the pictures. Anyway, so yeah, she insisted apparently that her own experience needs to be reflected in the rebooted show. And so she is embarking on a sexual adventure with a fat Mexican dyke with an undercut. Oh, and Carrie Bradshaw is holding a podcast dedicated to cis women, because that's definitely something that would, pay as much as being a high fashion reporter or writing, best-selling memoirs. But in related news, this is from Millie Payne at the Daily Mail. Marissa Tomei has revealed she advocated for Aunt May, her character in Spider-Man No Way Home, to be in a lesbian relationship. The 57-year-old actress told Geeks of Color, because of course, during a recent interview, that there was a moment she felt like her Marvel Cinematic Universe character should be with a woman because Ben Parker was gone. Oh, yes, I'm a widow now, so what do widows do? They become lesbians, right? That's how it works nowadays. She said, there was a moment and I felt that maybe she should just be with a woman because Ben is gone, and who would she be with, yeah, okay. The Academy Award winner, ho ho, very satirical, proceeded to explain how she thought producer Amy Pascal should portray Aunt May's love interest. If I were Amy Pascal, I would send her a message saying, "Get out of my slash fiction." Okay? That's what Marissa Tomei has been reduced to. And let's look at the latest panic porn from the Drudge Report. Just let me open up some tabs here. And okay, here we go. 99.33%. There's no context given for that number. So peak virus now. Year after vax rollout, COVID cases soared a record high. But how could that be happening? Chaos, confusion. WHO warns health system collapse. How long have I been saying that for? LA hospital under fire for treatment of dead patients. New Jersey Walmart closes after 90 workers catch. Marines call mandate purge, all religious exemption bids denied. Florida cases smash record. DeSantis vanishes. Dreams of new pill panacea dashed. Fauci, no hugs, no kissing. How about fornication? I bet he still thinks that that's on, right? CDC director, human behavior played into shortening quarantines. And Biden at the beach. Okay. This is from Kane at Citizen Free Press, and there's pictures and video and everything, and you can identify it by the new dog that they've got. They keep, I don't know, I mentioned this before, but Biden is one of those fellows, you know, he's a macho man, so he needs a macho dog. And German Shepherds need a lot of attention. They could be quite troublesome. I know my father had two, and it didn't work out in either case. But no, there's the pup. There they are at the beach, and there's Joe wearing a mask on what looks to be, well, it's outside. Does he have any idea how vast the atmosphere is? Plus, it's windy. And of course, Joe Biden, he appears to have been elected president on false pretenses. Again, from Kane at Citizen Free Press. There is no federal solution to COVID. Wait, what? Biden today, there's no federal solution. Biden 2020, I'm going to shut down the virus. And that is an exact quotation. And Glenn Greenwald had a quote, which was really quite good. That, and I know a lot of you are thinking the same thing. I mean, it's not a particularly original thought, but 2021, yes, 2020, every person who dies of COVID is somehow the president has personally murdered. 2021, there's nothing the president can do about COVID. Yeah. And let's talk about this absurd woman called Nicole Wallace. You know, she's one of the people who I'm never Trump. We'll give you a job. We'll give you a job on TV, a host job. This is from Steve Watson at Summit News. Following the spectacle of a man saying, "Let's go, Brandon," on a phone call to Joe Biden last week, MSNBC host Nicole Wallace ludicrously proclaimed Monday that the phrase is part of a, quote, slow-moving insurrection, unquote. Wallace played a clip of former Oregon police officer and father of four Jared Schmeck trolling Biden on Christmas Eve, noting that Schmeck later appeared on Steve Bannon's radio show telling the host that it is important to voice disapproval, the horror. "Let me tell you why this matters," Wallace stated, adding, "The asymmetry has always been what advantages the Trump right more than anything else. And the asymmetry of saying F you to a sitting president on a call in front of your four kids don't look past this. You see, it's all about decorum, and the Democrats and the media elite, the regime media, they're all about decorum. For instance, do you remember when Robert De Niro's career was ended at a stroke? When he appeared at the Tony Awards and shouted obscenities at the sitting president of the United States? We all remember that, right? Do you remember when Sarah Silverman's career ended at a stroke after she declared that he was, quote, worse than Hitler, unquote? We all remember that, but as Trump would say, many such examples. The host then turned to contributor Jason Johnson and said, "This is the slow motion insurrection, Jason, in full color." Johnson replied, "These people are basically just insurrectionists in training now." He further declared, "MAGA isn't about taxes. Let's go, Brandon, isn't about what you feel about supply chain issues and gas. It is the cry of insurrectionists. It is the cry of people who want to violently take over this country and oppress anyone who is not like them." Oh, you mean resist? You remember resist? When everyone in the Twitter feed and Facebook, it said resist. And, oh, Biden or Trump is not my president, and the election was stolen by Vladimir Putin. I seem to recall David A. French saying a very obscene thing about Trump. And he is Mr. Decorum. Is he not? And, okay. Of course, Nicole Wallace loves masks. I know, shocking. Kevin Tober, 94, tweeted, "Get help, Nicole B. Wallace." Quote, "I'm a Fauci groupie. I'm a thrice vaccinated mask adherent. I buy KN95 masks by the caseload. They're in every pocket. I wear them everywhere except when I sit down." Yeah. And, oh, yes. I was wondering when that turn was going to happen, the pivot. Now we've seen it. Because Biden was going to shut down COVID-19. And the only reason that Trump hadn't shut it down completely is because he's a wicked man who wanted people to die. As we all know, the president of the United States, or at least Trump, had a magic wand in an easily accessible drawer in his desk in the Oval Office. And he just selfishly refused to open the drawer, take out the wand, and wave it around. That would have been the end of COVID. So now the Biden death numbers have passed Trump's. Not that these numbers are reliable in any sense. And of course, it's all about states' rights now. Biden's become a federalist all of a sudden. And look who else has become a federalist. That would be the token conservative at the Washington Post, Jennifer, a.k.a. Jen Rubin. This is from Brian Flood at Fox News. Washington Post columnist Jennifer Rubin was savagely roasted Tuesday for asking Americans to stop agonizing over COVID cases after months of sounding the alarm as critics labeled her a partisan hypocrite. Rubin, who has been known for her turn to boosting Democrats after once holding conservative views, has pushed vaccines boosters, criticized COVID-19 denial and anti-mandate hysteria, and blamed former President Trump for the pandemic at every turn. However, she's had a sudden change of heart. She tweeted, "As we recognize that COVID-19 is not a deadly or even severe disease for the vast majority of responsible Americans, we can stop agonizing over cases and focus on those who are hospitalized or at risk of dying." You mean what should have been done in the first place? Golly. Now that Joe Biden is about to have an all-time COVID case high set 1 year into his administration, his allies are suddenly urging cases don't matter and it's time to get back to normal for most people. Anyone with a functional brain has been arguing this since last summer, Outkick founder Clay Travis responded. My old friend Michael Brendan Doherty at National Review said, "Here comes the shift." But Rubin was using this word responsible. Responsible. because, responsible Americans. Yeah, responsible. What does that mean? Does it mean that you're double vaxxed, triple vaxxed, and looking forward to 4, 5, and 6? Sure sounds like it. Not that that's going to make any difference. But since Biden decided to own the vaccines following his promise to eradicate COVID, things are not looking good for him on this. They're not looking good for him, with regard to anything. But yeah, let's pivot. Let's shift. Let's just come on. Let's get over this. At the same time, that the media has been fed. The governments, the so-called experts, have just been injecting or vaccinated, if you will, these people with adrenaline for almost 2 years, and they're hooked on adrenaline. Oh my God, COVID-19! There's 30 gazillion cases, and oh, it's not really all that dangerous. How dare you say that? How dare you? How dare you? Let's see what Eugippius at Substack has to say. Washington Post columnist, committed Biden fangirl, and corona hysteric Jennifer Rubin spent the fall fantasizing about vaccine mandates for Trump voters and casting the unvaccinated as villains responsible for rising infections in the lesser vaccinated American South. On August the 12th, she complained about the high prevalence of almost entirely meaningless corona infections among school children in Mississippi. And on September the 1st, she wrote of the variant spreading in low vaccination states, fanned by MAGA governors who oppose vaccine and mask mandates. Well, we are no longer in late summer when extensive climatization favors high rates of infection in the hottest regions. Instead, we are in the depths of winter, and now a lot of heavily vaccinated blue states are leading the case counts. Rubin has thus decided that we can stop agonizing over cases. In the same column, she also praises the CDC's softened quarantine restrictions introduced of necessity in the face of spiking Omicron infections as far more reasonable. The cumulative effect is to de-escalate the response to Omicron for vaccinated and boosted Americans for whom the risk is minimal. Bit by bit, Omicron is chipping away at containment, Eugippius concludes. Vaccinated and boosted Americans for whom the risk is minimal. So she says, oh, and more on the not so dreaded, perhaps, Omicron variant, which turns out might not, after all, be a biological Fukushima. CDC ain't much good at arithmetic, it turns out. This is from Yaron Steinbuch at the New York Post. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has drastically reduced its estimate of Omicron cases in the U.S., saying the variant accounted for about 59% of COVID-19 infections as of Christmas Day, a massive drop from the 73% previously reported. The CDC also significantly lowered its estimate for the week before Christmas, saying that the variant accounted for just 22.5% of all infections as of December the 18th. The Public Health Agency previously estimated that Omicron accounted for 73.2% of cases that week. So their authoritative estimate was 73.2%. They lowered that to 22.5%, rather sharpish. Boy, I sure hope someone got fired for that blunder. Dr. Scott, former FDA chief Scott Gottlieb, said, setting aside the question of how the initial estimate was so inaccurate, if CDC's new estimate of Omicron prevalence is precise, then it suggests that a good portion of the current hospitalizations we're seeing from COVID may still be driven by Delta infections. Remember the dreaded Delta variant? Here is a story from unheard.com, that's UNHERD, by Peter Stryker, and it's spelled Pieter, so I assume that he is Afrikaans. Omicron in South Africa, even milder than expected. Every number has come in under the projection. 2 weeks ago, when panic about the Omicron variant of COVID was at its peak, and it felt imminent the UK would be going back into lockdown, I gave an interview to Unheard's Freddie Sayers. I am a PhD in engineering and a research associate at the IFK University of Johannesburg. I'm not an epidemiologist, but I had been closely following the data of the Omicron wave that started in Gauteng province in my home country of South Africa. On December the 4th, I put together some basic projections for all the main Omicron variables, cases, hospital beds, ICU beds, ventilated beds, deaths, using simple growth rate extrapolations. And it turns out, no, below that. Much, much below that. It is true that South Africa is a very different country to the UK with a younger population and a different profile of prior immunity. But the population also has a major obesity problem, poor metabolic health, widespread HIV, and had been hit relatively badly by previous waves of the virus. So the idea that just because Omicron has not done much damage in South Africa, it'd still be devastating in the UK was always hard to believe. Well, when Canadian politicians boast about our success vis-a-vis the United States, well, yeah, there's other considerations, to consider. Americans are much fatter than Canadians are. And Florida was being used as, oh, look at Florida. Well, Florida's doing really well now. In Florida, the population is not only significantly fatter, it's also significantly older. But these things are never taken into account. Again, from Kane at Citizen Free Press, and this is a tweet from at The Recount. CNN medical correspondent, what is this name? Elizabeth Cohen, okay, that's the name, explains the flaws of one of the most popular at-home COVID tests, the Binix Now antigen test. The test will be wrong 35% of the time if you have COVID with symptoms. The test will be wrong 64% of the time if you have COVID without symptoms. So in other words, it is useless. For weeks, CNN has been pushing its viewers to buy Binix Now antigen tests. And, oh yes, the fact checkers were all over this on Twitter today. You may have noticed this. Oh, don't believe the words before your eyes because they mean something different. From Kane, reminder CDC to withdraw use of PCR test for COVID on January the 1st. Yeah, withdrawn. Supposedly the gold standard, was it not? And, oh, yes, we're going to show those nurses, other medical professionals. We don't need them. We don't need these lepers contaminating us. Again, from Kane at Citizen Free Press. There's, you may have noticed there's several sites that I go to on a regular basis. I mean, I go to a lot of different sites, but Citizen Free Press, Summit News, the Daily Mail, they cover news that other outlets don't. Fired nurses get the last laugh. Suddenly the unvaccinated are wanted back. Hospitals facing staff shortages suddenly are asking their unvaccinated nurses to come back. Band Blonde says, my friend is a nurse in Oregon. The local hospital fired about 140 nurses over vax mandates. So now they hire a bunch of traveling nurses to fill the positions. And guess what? Travelers don't have to be vaccinated. Peter Sweden tweets hospitals in Alberta put 1,400 healthcare workers on leave before Christmas for being unvaccinated. Now they are begging them to come back to work because of the Omicron surge. And, let's look at the latest numbers from Ontario. They've been going back and forth on whether they're going to give us, the data that everyone wants. But Morgan Lowry has done so, today. New COVID-19 health measures announced amid another record-breaking day in Canada. Of course, so much of this has to do with more testing, but we've been saying this for over a year. But we need more tests, more tests, more tests. What do the tests induce or foment? Panic. Another day of record-breaking COVID-19 case counts across Canada prompted a new round of health announcements on Wednesday, including details of Quebec's plan to reduce isolation times for healthcare workers who are exposed to or infected with COVID-19. Quebec's update came during a technical briefing one day after Health Minister Christian Dubé said that the province would have no choice but to allow some healthcare staff to continue working despite testing positive or being exposed if the province wanted to keep the healthcare system operational. Yeah, how about that? And let's see if I can get those numbers. You know what the numbers are going to be, right? As to who is getting it now. Because as I predicted about 3 weeks ago, this was going to turn, and it was going to turn quickly. And indeed, it has. Oh, is the problem now not enough tests? Ontario sets new record COVID-19 case count despite test scarcity with 10,436 new cases. Okay. Here, is it in this story? Come on. Give me the story here. Give me the data, rather. Did they remove that from the story? It's possible. Hang on a second. Nope, here we go. Of the cases, 276 involved people with an unknown vaccination status. 425 involved partially vaccinated people. 8,221 involved fully vaccinated people. Now, keep in mind that these numbers do not include all those people who've been thrice jabbed. They're included in the fully vaccinated category. I have to be quite careful about what I'm going to quote from Jim Kunstler's latest column because he's drawing some conclusions which are dangerous. I mean, they're literally dangerous. This is the sort of thing that gets people I don't know, disappeared. I mean that metaphorically, of course. His column is called Stop and Assess. Reality is penetrating the fog and fury of propaganda spewed out over cable TV news in what may be the last desperate full-out campaign to sell vaccines to the credulous. Omicron is a bust despite the shrieking about overstuffed hospitals. They're not. In the New York Times. Just as there is a crack-up boom in the final stage of a financial crisis, there is a climactic surge of hysteria in the COVID-19 war against Western Civ. Now, Dr. Anthony Fauci is pushing proof of vax for U.S. air travel because, quote, a vaccine requirement for a person getting on the plane is just another level of getting people to have a mechanism that would spur them to get vaccinated, unquote. Yeah. In other words, it's just coercion. It's not the science. It's just coercion. Monday morning on NPR, Dr. Fauci was beating the drum about the unvaxxed being a menace to society as maxi spreaders of Omicron. Is it possible he hasn't heard that the vaxxed are catching it at a greater rate despite their vaxes than the unvaxxed? Do you know why? Because their previous vaxes have detuned their immune systems. That's why. And then he goes to go on about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s book, and too dangerous to talk about. And then, yes, the other view of how this happened, and I can't possibly talk about that. It may turn out to be various combinations of both views with a uniting overlay of mass formation psychosis. In any case, I'm serenely convinced that we will learn the truth about all this, and perhaps not too far down the line. At this point, the official narratives are crazier than anything out of Alice in Wonderland, leading with the nakedly absurd idea that the vaxxed must be protected from the unvaxxed, though all are susceptible to COVID and equally capable of spreading it. Do the doctors actually believe this effing nonsense? The ones on TV, maybe, but the rank and file must be getting rather nervous about what they have been responsible for in following the diktats of corrupt public health officials. This traditionally blank week between Christmas and New Year's, when almost nothing gets done, is an opportunity to stop and assess the situation. Do you not see what is going on? Will you allow yourself to keep getting hosed by illegitimate authorities? Do you want your personal sovereignty back? Do you want your country back? Will you go along with obvious malevolence just to avoid standing out and risking your status, your livelihood, your special privileges? Constant concludes, do you actually believe in what is known as your sacred honor and what relation it has to reality? Do you understand that periodically in history, the human race goes crazy and does terrible things that it later regrets? This is one of those times. And Rand Paul is in the news again, and he's talking about therapeutics. And it has been the decided opinion of the medical establishment, what everywhere in the Western world, the non-Western world is quite different, that no, therapeutics are bad. No, we don't want therapeutics, just the vaccines, 1 and 2 and 3, and then maybe more. Because why would you want to take things off the shelf that are proved to be at least, safe, right? Why would you want that? I could point out that these drugs are typically, well, almost free, but I'm sure that has nothing to do with it. And, okay. Oh, yes, speaking of 2+, Ontario to expand COVID-19 booster shot eligibility to all adults 3 months out from their second dose. And you know what that means. They're meaning that at best, the second dose has efficacy for up to, 3 months. That would be optimistic. And, they're panicking in Manitoba, where, again, one would get the impression that what they're stacking bodies, dead bodies, like cordwood. Are they? Let's just take a look, because these numbers are available. COVID-19 cases. Come on. How many deaths? We're talking about 2 years here. 1,384 deaths. And how many people live in Manitoba? Well, let's just find out. Give me a second here. 1.28 million people. And we have had 1,384 deaths. How many ICU patients? 25. And yet they're going nuts. This is from James Turner at CBC. We need to lock down. Manitoba doctors react to updated public health restrictions. New orders softballing what COVID is now shooting us with a cannon. Retired doctors say, with a cannon. Ooh. I feel like I'm on a ghost ship right now, said Dr. Jill Horton, a general internist at Winnipeg's Health Sciences Center. Overall, there's just a bigger picture here that it feels like it's being missed. And I feel somewhat despondent right now, like I'm sure many Manitobans do. Yeah, okay. 24 months. Let's say 24 months, okay, just to round it off. And again, how many deaths? 1,384. That's really not very many, considering, comorbidities, what comorbidities these people would have. Let's check in on panic porn. Let's see if we can rank this. Bruce Arthur, former jock sniffer, now honest to goodness COVID reporter for the Toronto Star. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, no. Canada's bobsled team has been affected. Well, it doesn't get any more serious than that, does it? I don't think so. Wow, he's just tweeting up a storm here. Tweeting up a storm. Even if we're not going to get the Omicron variant eventually, it's important we not get it all at once, opines Picard on health. This is another lunatic from the Globe. That's the only way we'll keep our hospitals from being overwhelmed. If there will be a lot of collateral damage. I've been told this take is alarmist, says Bruce Arthur. Oh, undercounts, wild undercounts. That's exactly what we've had from the beginning. This thread lays it out. Omicron overwhelms, test, trace, and anything but heavy restrictions. And even then, what happens when lots of hospital workers get infected, or grocery store employees, or critical infrastructure employees get it, which is why severity is all. So he's keeping it up. He's keeping up the panic. You know, that's his signature. And let's hear from Canada's most famous Bryan Singer lookalike, Professor Timothy Caulfield of the University of Alberta. Oh, the twisted logic of the anti-vax cult. Ooh, Aaron Rodgers. Oh, yes, unproven therapies. He's railing against unproven therapies. Apparently, this fellow has no sense of irony. Robert Malone suspended by Twitter today. Reaction: great news. He has been spreading harmful misinformation. He has not contributed to meaningful or constructive scientific debate. His views are demonstrably wrong and polarizing. What took so long? Yeah, I believe in free speech, but I don't know. My belief in this has become rather attenuated. Maybe when we're in charge, we can make a list of people who've disgraced themselves, scared people to death. I think that Robert Malone knows a hell of a lot more about RMNA therapy than Timmy Caulfield, given that he invented it. Oh, Diane Francis, who was once described as the highest paid journalist in Canada, former editor of the Financial Post. Years ago, this woman wrote that Quebec separatism emerged from and was directed by the basements of Catholic churches in Quebec. I don't think that Diane Francis knows very much about the Catholic Church or Quebec for that matter, because the separatists in Quebec are not then and now known for their religiosity. And then, I don't know what, about 10 years ago or so, she wrote a piece stating that all women should work. I mean, it's really a moral requirement for all women should work, and that women who do not work, who selfishly stay home to look after their children, are, you could say, traitors to the GDP. She has another hot take here in the Financial Post. Make the unvaccinated pay for their own health care. The Omicron variant is the Grinch who stole Christmas. Sorry, it's busted. As well as the economic recovery. It's time for Canada's provinces to consider the nuclear option. Nuclear weapons are not good things. What, this is bad writing. The nuclear option? Oh, how many people do you want to kill? Denying publicly funded health care to anyone who is eligible to get a vaccine but refuses to do so, and forcing them to pay for COVID treatment out of pocket. Now do AIDS, Diane. Given that Omicron seems to infect vaccinated individuals much more easily than other variants, it is increasingly likely they will all contract the virus at some point. Vaccinated individuals more easily than other variants. So the solution to the problem of Omicron is to punish the unvaccinated, especially given that the vaccinated, okay. What a horrible, horrible woman this is. Public health minister should not be confused with freedom of choice or rights. Singapore, oh, let's make Canada like Singapore. I can hardly wait. Is merely making people take responsibility for their decisions. If you don't want to be vaccinated and don't protect yourself and fall ill, nobody else should have to pay for your personal negligence and irresponsibility. Canada should follow suit. How far do we want to go down this road? I mentioned AIDS. I could mention, rock climbing. I could mention skiing. Skiing is rather dangerous, in the scheme of things and all the different activities that people could do. I could talk about, what are you doing? What was I doing navigating the sidewalks of Victoria on a day when the sidewalks and the roads are covered in snow, compacted snow and slush? Was my trip really necessary? And, oh yes, a super Karen has emerged. You've probably all heard this story. This is from technotrends.com. Patricia Cornwall, a former Playboy model, has been charged with causing a fight in the Delta. That's what it says here. It's obviously translated from some foreign language. She is accused of invoking the name of civil rights icon Rosa Parks and then punching and spitting on a passenger, a quite elderly man, who challenged her on the analogy, according to federal court documents. Karen, sit down, a fellow passenger advised. Patty Breton was Cornwall's previous moniker, and she's an actress best known for Baywatch, Married with Children. Oh, she was in Baywatch and Married with Children, so I wondered what she's notable for. And Playboy Cheerleaders, 1997. Oh, yeah, before I get into Justin Trudeau, let's go to the chat here. Because Justin Trudeau said something extraordinary yesterday, and the media has decided to ignore it, completely ignore it. Justin Trudeau's brother died skiing, I recall. This is absolutely true. He died in an avalanche. And I've had many people say to me that it was a shame about this young man because he was the best of them. Don Willis says, I threw out a bunch of my poetry. I saw a mini Moz droning about hurt, bitching about petty things. My presidential library be damned. Michael Doherty, who I mentioned a while ago, said that he'd been delighted, this was some years ago, that some poetry that he'd written, I don't know, in high school had been discovered. I wrote poetry in high school, and I would pay money to have it destroyed. Sonny Bono also died skiing, says Don Willis. Also, Michael Schumacher has been like a vegetable for, 10 years because he hit a tree while skiing. Also, that Irish actor's wife, Liam Neeson's wife, says British American. Yes, a lovely woman. Hello to Emma Nimpton and to Professor Paul. Kakva Pajavaitya. Yeah. Skiing into a tree. Ugh, it sounds horrible. Favorite dress shoes? It says Halper. I don't know. Brogues. Actually, I'm quite fond of slip-ons myself. Because I just, you know with the brogues, you're going to break a shoelace eventually, right? And what's a good time to break a shoelace? Because you're never going to break a shoelace when you're not putting your shoes on because you have to go somewhere. And, okay. Is Nikita even possible as a woman's name in Russia? No, it is not. British American says, no, it's not. I wonder if Elton was having a bit of joke there. Well, he never wrote the lyrics. It was Bernie Taupin and Gary Osborne later. Bernie Taupin, perhaps the worst lyricist of all time, and I'm including, Greg Lake and Peter Sinfield in there. That tune about the Princess of Wales, Marilyn Monroe originally. Wow, that's not a mixed metaphor car crash. It's a mixed metaphor Chernobyl, an explosion and a fire. Panic on the streets of Alberta, panic on the streets of Manitoba. I wonder myself, will life ever be the same again, says Anne Run. Yes, Moz fan. I quite like Moz myself, although, he's absurd a lot of the time. David the Gnome says, just wait, scientists are working on this. Okay, Manitoba Panic, another great band name. You just reminded me of Handsome Dick Manitoba, who's very angry with Andy, the founder of the Dictators, because Andy won't let him use the name anymore. Because Andy, sure enough, has retired from music and become a sommelier, something like that. Oscar Toe says, I've lucked out with this vax. I've been to doctors, surgeons, dentists, etc. Not one asked if I wanted a shot. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Did Desmond invent the tutu, says Oscar Toe. Israeli police seem to be very heavy-handed against mandate protesters in Tel Aviv. Jokin 666. Get a big stein of beer and a turkey leg or whatnot, says David the Gnome. What if Trump comes back with a big, glorious Fu Manchu, says Oscar Toe. No, they can't keep this up for much longer. They simply can't. They simply can't. Bruce Arthur and Timothy Caulfield and the like will say, oh, no, we were right. We were right from the very beginning, which is what I've been predicting since March of last year. That regardless of how, what a bollocks they make of this, they are going to pat themselves on the back and say, if it weren't for us, there would have been 30 gazillion times more dead people. They're probably already saying it now. Don Willis likes a dictator's reference. Okay. Che Blutarsky. I'm not going to repeat a defamatory statement there. What else do we have? Oh, let's talk about Trudeau. Let's talk about Trudeau. So his Christmas message, yes, Omicron. Things are going to get better. When? In a tweet posted on December 28th, the Prime Minister said, the year may be coming to an end, but with Omicron spreading quickly around the world, it's clear that this pandemic isn't. But we can finish the fight against COVID-19 if we keep working together. So do your part. Get vaccinated and get your booster when it's your turn. Okay, what else did he have to say that day? He was interviewed by a woman called Julie Schneider, who is one of the very most famous women in Quebec. After the referendum of 1995, English Canada said, we don't care about you anymore. Okay? If you want to leave, leave. We're not going to pretend to pay attention to you, but I can tell you that Julie Schneider is, again, what they call a vedette, a very, very famous person. And despite the fact that she's 55 years old, she dresses and comports herself as if she were 30 or under. So in this interview with Julie Schneider, which was in French, she said that people who do not get vaccinated against COVID-19, he said, are often racist, misogynist, and anti-science. And he questioned whether the rest of Canada needs to tolerate the vaccinated. And Julie Schneider jumped in to say, oh, the unvaccinated, the extremists. This should be the leading story. But I wasted a lot of time on two different search engines trying to find a full English translation of this, or even a full French text of this, so I could use Google Translate or equivalent, or to see that the National Post or the Globe and Mail or the Toronto Star or whoever paying attention to this. Nope. We can't make Justin Trudeau look bad since he gives us all this money, $600 million to bail us out a few years ago. And what a big top up. Conveniently before the last election. In my experience, it is your typical anti-vaxxer, if you want to use that term, is more likely to be female than male. And I'm looking at a picture of Julie Schneider, who I must admit was quite a cute young woman. But one gets to a certain age and it's just the short shorts. Please. Oh, by the way, Julie Schneider has just tested positive for COVID-19. So I guess the vaccine did not avail in her case. Oh, you know what else Canada's government has been up to? This is from Sweekar Oli at the National Post. Canada's Public Health Agency admits it tracked 33 million mobile devices during lockdown. Public Health Agency of Canada accessed location data from 33 million mobile devices to monitor people's movement during lockdown, the agency revealed. Due to the urgency of the pandemic, PHAC collected and used mobility data such as cell tower location data throughout the COVID-19 response, a spokesperson told the National Post. PHAC used the location data to evaluate the effectiveness of public lockdown measures and to allow the agency to understand possible links between movement of populations within Canada and spread of COVID-19. In March, the agency awarded a contract to the TELUS Data for Good program to provide de-identified and aggregated data of movement trends in Canada. The contract expired in October, and PHAC no longer has access to the location data. Well, that's what they're claiming. Oh, do you remember that ridiculous conspiracy theory that the government would use COVID as an excuse? And of course, the interface between COVID-19 and smartphones to start tracking our movements. Oh, that was just absolute. Well, it happened. Okay. And how many times did it happen? Well, 33 million mobile devices. Hey, you want to sign up for this track and trace? You want to sign up for the mandate? All that sort of thing? Because there's lots of advantages, like the government knowing where you are all the time. Eugippius, who I quoted earlier, has a piece called "The Beginning of the End. The virus part of the pandemic will probably soon be over." Early reports that Omicron is substantially milder than other SARS-2 strains are every day confirmed by new data. A month into the unprecedented South African case spike driven entirely by Omicron, corona deaths remain low. It's earlier days in the United Kingdom, where Omicron is only just over half the cases. So far, though, it is the same story there. In the coming months, Omicron will outcompete all other lineages everywhere in the world. At that point, corona will have completed its transformation into a mild coronavirus that nobody should care about, in the same way that nobody cares about other common human-infecting coronaviruses like HCOV OC43. Unforeseen developments are always possible. Omicron might in time acquire greater pathogenicity. Particularly if we insist on vaccinating widely, we might drive its evolution in new and potentially dangerous directions. The major question is, however, the rest of the corona circus will respond. Some thoughts on that. In the short term, rising cases will probably fuel demand for more vaccinations. This is the blunt, stupid way that our public health experts respond to infections now, but it is not a game that will go well for the vaccinators. The vaccines will fail even more profoundly in stopping Omicron transmission, and there will be far fewer severe outcomes for them to prevent. I don't know how long the crackpot vaccination regime can survive overt absurdities like this. Omicron will probably also unwind the broader containment regime. South Africa has already abandoned their most intrusive tracing, quarantine, and isolation policies, declaring a shift towards mitigation, which is what they should have done in the first place. Trying to defeat a minimally symptomatic, highly contagious virus with the comically inadequate tools of the contact tracer is simply too ridiculous. In the longer term, Eugippius continues, things look much more uncertain. It is hard to shake the feeling that corona has swept away the last vestiges of liberal democracy in Europe and perhaps in the whole world. I don't think these political systems have been very good for the West, but our new theocratic regimes, steered by the corona astrologers, have been vastly worse. As soon as the hysteria boils off, many of these villains will begin trying to get the panic machine up and running again. The alternative is a future where nobody much cares about what they have to think, where they're no longer able to interfere in millions of lives, and perhaps, most crucially, where a lot of politicians, journalists, and ordinary people begin to realize what utter failures they and their policies have been. Eugippius concludes, there are failures that lose you your job. There are failures that make you a public disgrace. And then there are the failures, the kind that lead to arrest, indictment, imprisonment, and worse. And I've mentioned this story before. I want to mention it again because it's extremely important, particularly when we're talking about numbers, case numbers, hospitalizations, ICUs. This is from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. New figures out of England show that 65% of people described as COVID patients only tested positive for COVID after being admitted to hospital for something else. And of course, what is the likelihood that so many of these people were actually infected in hospital? Hang on just a second. I'll be right back. Well, I hope the Sentinel kept you company during my brief absence. Let's look at the Daily Skeptic, formerly Lockdown Skeptics. William Parker argues in Burnbrook magazine that the government's scientific advisors are finally losing their grip. Andrew Lillico writes in the Telegraph, this New Year could mark the beginning of the end for COVID restrictions. Adnams brewery boss says sector lost 50% of Christmas trade. Duke University orders staff to get booster by February 1st or face the boot. NFL has created two-class system for vaccinated and unvaccinated, says Aaron Rodgers. America's least vaccinated states led in-store holiday shopping. COVID isolation rules may be relaxed to stop Australia's pandemic. The Australian Prime Minister is considering easing COVID rules after surging cases of the Omicron variant overwhelmed testing sites and put thousands into isolation, stifling businesses and disrupting summer holiday travel. What did they think was going to happen? Why are Joe and Joe Biden masking up on the beach when they're alone? Joe and Joe Biden have worn masks to walk their dog alone on a beach while on their Delaware vacation. The Bidens, who are booster vaccinated, covered their faces for no apparent reason. Maybe they have come to love the feeling of suffocation. Is that possible? I think it is. I think it is. Chinese lockdown rule breakers are publicly shamed and paraded through the streets in Jingzi. Wow. Hey, remember those good old days of the Cultural Revolution? They're back. And now they have computers. Boris Johnson tells the public to have a cautious and sensible New Year's Eve. Britain's New Year's Eve, a lot of vomiting. A lot of vomiting. Also, adolescents passed out in the streets. Also, women dressed like prostitutes with impossibly high heels, smacking each other in the streets before vomiting on each other and then passing out. The Scottish National Party tells Scots not to dodge COVID restrictions by celebrating New Year's Eve in England, because that would go against the spirit of the COVID restrictions, says John Swinney, Scotland's Deputy First Minister. A Belgian court overturns closure of cinemas and theatres. English border pubs bracing for 100,000 to cross from Scotland and Wales on New Year's Eve. I'm tempted, if England finally declares independence, which I think will happen, and I hope will happen, that they, rebuild Hadrian's Wall. And you clowns wanted devolution. You wanted more and more powers. You wanted more and more perks with English taxpayers paying for them. Now you can live with the likes of Nicola Sturgeon. November's age standardized mortality rate was 8% higher than the 5-year average. Much of the increase seems to be accounted for by non-COVID cases. Yes, dementia, Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, chronic lower respiratory diseases, cerebrovascular diseases, etc., etc. Cut self-isolation period to save the NHS, Boris is urged. Okay. We got to isolate. Well, if everyone who's exposed, whatever that means, has to isolate, who is going to be available to do anything? As previously mentioned, this is Tyler Durden at Zero Hedge. After months of providing valuable COVID-19 information that runs counter to the official narrative, Twitter has finally banned Dr. Robert Malone, inventor of mRNA technology. Malone, who will appear on the Joe Rogan Show Thursday, according to associate Ed Dowd, one of 4 contributors to the Malone doctrine, had more than 520,000 followers. He's been an outspoken critic of both mRNA vaccines as well as the abysmal failures of policymakers worldwide in responding to the pandemic. And Long on AMC tweeted, "This is what got him banned. There wasn't even any misinformation. The video verbatim went line through line on the data. This is nothing short of gross censorship at the behest of corporate interests." And of course, little Timmy Caulfield, oh, misinformation, liar, hurting people. And now we've got to the point where actually reading from government documents is misinformation. Well, I mean, it could be, and it often is. But aren't we supposed to trust the experts? And aren't they the most expert of all? And, oh, yes. I don't want to go into my whole death feud with Ezra Levant again, because I've talked about it before. But and as everyone knows, I hold no brief for Ezra Levant. But apparently, Rebel News was going to buy a facility in Calgary so they could centralize their operations in a place where they wouldn't have to worry about being kicked out of. Also inviting other right-wing organizations take part. And two leading bankers at the Royal Bank in Calgary approved this. Levant has this on tape. Levant put up a personal guarantee for this, and in Toronto, they said no. And according to the people in Calgary, the reason for this was that, no, we don't want to give a mortgage to someone like Ezra Levant. Someone said in Twitter that in a way that it's useful this happened because it makes people aware of woke capital, and people who constantly been rabbiting on about the virtues of capitalism will see that capitalism is not quite what it was. Capitalism was always rapacious, but there were some rules. And those rules don't exist. The rule is now we are good, you are evil if you disagree with us in any respect, and we will do all we can to destroy you. So, if you are Canadian, I think it would behoove you to express support for Levant here, because this is a line we do not want to cross. How long before your electricity company says you're not getting electricity because we don't like your politics, or your ISP says, you're not getting that because we don't like your politics? How long before gas stations say, well, we're not selling you any gas. We don't like your politics. There is a quasi-monopoly situation with regard to banks in Canada. There's something like 6 of them. And they're, where does your credit card come from? Well, it comes from one of these major banks. And okay, in my daily, Canada is fatuous beyond a belief highlight. This is from Catherine Tunney at CBC. A Cold War in a hotter world. Canada's intelligence sector confronts climate change. Canada needs to step up its intelligence game, that's in quotation marks, to prepare for climate change, says former advisor to the Prime Minister. This is Tricia Geddes, Deputy Director for Policy at CSIS. This is something that will absolutely have profound impacts on Canadians. It will have impacts on our national security. I think it's important that we're going to be in that space. I think obviously this is another one of those big shifts that's obviously been happening for a long time that we're on the watch for. And I think there will be a significant contribution from the service. Vincent Rigby, who was until recently Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's national security advisor, says that climate change is a cumulative threat. A single mudslide doesn't make a national security crisis, but floods and slides increasing in severity over time due to the warming climate could threaten the security of the entire country. What CSIS is saying apparently is they don't have any reason to exist anymore. How about terrorist threats? Yeah, we'll talk about the Proud Boys. Is that where the terrorist threats are coming? We don't want to go into, where it's actually coming from. How about China? What? China. What, is that a country now? You're serious? Oh, really? I thought they called it the Orient or something. Do they still have the opium trade there? How could that possibly be any kind of threat to Canada? Any kind of threat at all? So no, they have no reason. They have no raison d'etre. CBC has a series called First Person, and here's its latest heartwarming story: how my daughter is helping me learn First Nations history and culture. As a new immigrant, I feel a sense of responsibility to learn about Canada from non-settler perspectives, says Bikram Rijal, who came from Nepal 10 years ago. This is the absolute height of effrontery. Non-settler perspectives. You are a settler. My family has been in this country since 1840, and there are many Canadians whose families have been in this country for many years before that. We actually built this country. He's just a tourist, and he is bashing us Canadians. Oh, because of colonialism and the like. He's a PhD student at Simon Fraser University. Do the Native Indians have a lot in the way of universities? Do they? Do they have a lot in the way of what even might be called formal learning? And we get a bunch of old wives' tales. Do you know that the Indians could do anything with cedar bark? Anything. Baby diapers, bedding, sanitary napkins, towels. Golly, napkins. Because that's one of the things that's common to all primitive people. Let's say Native Indians, or to Germans, the old Germans, fighting the Roman Empire. They had this need for napkins. The old Gauls, they would sooner die than go without a napkin. Sure, they may have eaten porridge, with their fingers, but napkins are essential in every culture. Okay. This was trending on Twitter today. I had a white friend, and you can see where this is going already, right? You can see where this is going. White people are horrible. Don't you just hate them? Someone whose Twitter handle is so stupid, I'm not even going to repeat it. I had a white friend, but now she is hostile and unpleasant. I'm sure it wasn't me. I didn't do anything to her except be brown and queer. And probably remind her of that every 5 minutes, and explain how her voting choices would kill me, my friends, and possibly my children. How else would she learn her actions have consequences? She sounds like a wonderful person to be around. Michelle Obama wrote her Princeton senior thesis on her own experience of being a student at Princeton and how white people made her life miserable. Apparently, she didn't have a lot of friends at Princeton, which I can well believe. And I think it went something like this, that you have 3 white girls, and they're sort of umming and erring around it. And one of them blurts out, "I just can't stand that Michelle. She's just so rude. She's so mean." And what do you think? Is it racist for me to say that? No, I don't think so. So what should we do? How about if we find a nicer black woman to be friends with? Michael Harriot, who also seems like an absolutely delightful person, he says, "I too had a white friend, but now he is hostile and unpleasant. I'm sure it wasn't me. All I did was speak truthfully about the history of the country we live in. Is this what happens when you use seasoning?" Oh, okay. So, yeah, apparently his white friend, assuming this person actually existed, didn't like slavery, 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 slavery. How about Michael Harriot? If this white person every time he saw you, or about every 10 minutes, said 1350. It's not 1350 anymore, by the way. It's 1356. How about if that person reminded you of that all the time? Probably wouldn't like that. Probably wouldn't like that. Oh, and we have the allies like John Pavlovitz chiming in. Oh, he's the author of God is Love. Don't be a jerk. Love your neighbor. Get vaccinated. Okay. Republicans are not afraid of critical race theory. They don't even know what it is. They're afraid of theories critical of racists. They know who they are. Mountain's Mama says, I had a white friend who told me I was surprising, articulate, shit that never happened. TXT. I told her she was surprisingly not. I had a white friend who told me it was acceptable for white people to use the N-word with the ah ending. He proceeded to use it in an example to prove his point. I called him out and asked him if he knew that my father was black. He said, funny, you don't look black. And we have a rainbow flag here. And we have the vaccination symbol and the symbol for woman dancing. This is actually how this person, a grown adult, describes himself. The GFJ Jr., grown ass child of a mother raised in Nazi Germany and a father raised in Jim Crow, Alabama. I'm biracial, way gay, immigrant atheist who knows some things. I'll have to take your word for it. Joy Ann Reed, the stupidest woman on television, tweeted, woo, the I had a white friend hashtag is a full collegiate course in what it's like to be black in America. Kudos to Michael Harriot for getting the conversation started. Well, Michael and the lady who tweeted about how she had a black friend till CRT made them mean or something. Black people, well, members of the black elite are want to blame white people for their problems because of white flight. On the one hand, they can't stand being around white people because white people literally kill them in all manner of ways. On the other hand, why are they fleeing? Well, if you want to know, leave aside 1356 and other things. Look at this hashtag. I had a white friend. And that will explain so very much. There's a piece at unheard.com by Tumia Owolade called The Godfather of Critical Race Theory, and it's about Derek Bell, the first Black American to be a tenured professor at Harvard Law School. It should never have happened. Neither of his parents attended college, and Bell himself had studied at the relatively undistinguished Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. Today, a central argument that racism is a permanent feature of American society is now mainstream. What I found interesting in this story is this assumption regarding Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, verdict that ended separate but equal and led to forced integration, forced busing, and the like. But Derek Bell was not keen or didn't seem to be very pleased about this. In an article published in the Harvard Law Review in 1980, Bell argued that the decision was based on, quote, value to whites, not simply those concerned about the immorality of racial inequality, but also those whites in policy-making positions, able to see the economic and political advances at home and abroad that would follow abandonment of segregation, unquote. That planted axiom is entirely false. There is no economic advance whatsoever that followed the end of segregation. For Black people, it's been about better for about half of them. The other half live lives that are so horrible that we don't talk about it. And Black people don't talk about it except to blame guns, which supposedly, fall from the sky and start shooting Black people. The cost, the economic cost, and the continuing economic cost of the end of segregation has been so stupendous that what would it be as a percentage of American GDP. 10%, 20%, 30%. But no, that's a very curious argument. Very curious argument from Derek Bell. I'm going to go to delayed Music Monday in just a minute. Before I do, I am going to go to the chat. And okay, so let's see. Anrun, come on, people, now smile on your brother. Everybody get together and try to vax one another right now. That's from Anrun, and I'm continually impressed by the examples of wit in the chat. I'm not going to repeat what David the Gnome said about Michelle. Her brother was David Robinson was a basketball star and seems to be a far more pleasant person than Michelle. Oh, yes. Hello to this fellow whose first name I cannot possibly pronounce. The last one is Gameston. Very interesting for Prince Charles to be proxy funding communists to support global economic transformation. Jay Blatarski says Native Americans were only 5 years away from space travel before Columbus showed up and ruined everything. Jokin666 says they used every part of the animal. Yeah, nah. Well, that doesn't make any sense for all sorts of reasons. For instance, were they doing this hunting in winter? Because if they weren't, they didn't have refrigeration. I'm trying to remember the name of that movie based on a true story about this foolish young man who went up alone to Alaska to see if he could thrive. Not Timothy Treadwell, another person. And he manages to kill an animal, and the flies and the rest of it are right on top of it immediately. Apparently, the Indians used a technique, and others who killed buffalo and the like, where they would strip pieces of meat because there's simply not enough time to carve it up because it's devoured. So no. Also, the existence of a town in Alberta called Head Smashed in Buffalo, Jump. The Unions used to stampede buffalo over cliffs for fun. Rollo Klevich says, weren't Quebec Nats Catholic in the 30s and 40s like Adrien Arcand, former hero of Pierre Trudeau? Yeah, they were, actually. But nationalism meant something different then. British American says, oh God, another PhD student. British American says, a man has zero influence on the climate. It's all sun cycles waxing and waning, making for warmer and colder ages, respectively. Well, the Earth's temperature cooled during the period 1940 to 1970, which was up to that point, the period of the greatest industrial expansion in history. And yet the Earth cooled. Hello to Gamion. And hello to Yo Mama. Last year's New Year's, I saw 2021 rung in with the mayor of New Orleans twerking with a giant black drag freak. It was a fitting end to 2020. And okay, let's talk about the Kinks. I want to talk about their 1968 album called The Kinks Are the Village Green Preservation Society, which was released in the United Kingdom on November the 22nd, 1968, which was the same day as the Beatles' White Album. There's many such examples in popular music history. Peter Blegvad made an album with John Graves and Lisa Herman called Q Roan, which is one of my very favorite records. And it happened to be released on the same record label, Virgin, the same day as Nevermind the Bollocks. The Village Green Preservation Society album was a stiff. It didn't even chart in Britain. It was rather shocking. The Kinks were founded in 1963 uh, two brothers, Raymond Douglas Davis and his brother Dave. One of the famous brother combos. Most of them come to grief or come to blows. You've got the brothers from Oasis, the Gallagher brothers, and you have the Everly brothers, right? And you have the Knopfler brothers from Dire Straits. I guess not very many people remember that Mark Knopfler's brother was the rhythm guitarist in Dire Straits for their first 3 or 4 albums. The Davis brothers are one of the most notorious examples of brothers not getting on. But Dave Davis, he hated Mick Avery, the drummer, more than he hated his own brother, and he was such a jerk on stage that one night Mick Avery took a cymbal off the stand and threw it like a frisbee and came close to severing a carotid artery. Then fistfights between Dave Davis, Mick Avery. Eventually, Davis succeeded in forcing Mick Avery out of the band, much to Ray Davis's sadness. The original band, look, all these fellows played R&B music. R&B music, Motown covers and the like, and even the Zombies, even Colin Blunstone, with his wispy versions. You really got a hold on me and the like. Some of them were better than others. The Move was pretty good at it, I have to say. But the Kinks, no one would have paid much attention to the Kinks at all, unless they wrote their own music. It used to be that you didn't write your own music, because that's what professional songwriters did. And then the Beatles did it, and everyone followed. The Davises come from North London. They later made a record called Muswell Hillbillies after Muswell Hill. One of my very favorites of their records. And they had a manager who thought that it would be quite the thing to, Peter Grenville and Robert Wace, Grenville Collins and Robert Wace, that they would make them attractive to debutantes, by dressing them in foppish or kinky clothing, velvets and the like. Well, that didn't really get on very well. They hooked up with the American producer Shel Talmy, who of course also worked, had many hits with The Who. And they put out 2 singles and with Pie Records, which were flops. And so it was make or break time. And this was commonplace in those days. You weren't given a lot of time to make a name for yourself. And having a single come out that didn't chart or didn't get into the top 30, you were on thin ice. So Dave Davis decided to do something unusual, to get a particular sound, a sound that was the opposite of clean. And so he mangled the speaker cone with a knife, cut it up, pushed pinholes in it. And the result was You Really Got Me, which was followed up by All Day and All in the Night, which I think is a better tune, or a better realization than You Really Got Me. And the Kinks were then huge in England and briefly in the United States. So the Kinks were banned from America from 1966 to 1970, and this is still a mystery. Still a mystery. There's talk about some musician head being scandalized by the way they carried on stage, or some story about some musician official being punched by some member of the band. But in any event, they were banned, and that finished them in the United States until 1971. when their comeback single Lola came out. The Kinks arguably invented what later came to be known as heavy metal. But Ray Davis, who was the primary songwriter for the band, and I think a great deal of the resentment between the brothers is that Dave Davis, I saw an interview in which he claimed to have given his brother, I don't know, a package of riffs. People do that, which Dave Davis claimed was the basis for all the hits that followed. I rather doubt it. But, you know, unless your band makes a lot of money, the only people who are doing well are the people who write the songs. So Ray Davis was, you know, doing far better than the other members of the band, and Dave Davis was doing better than the bass player and the drummer, Pete Quaife, the bass player, but not nearly as well as his brother, and that always leads to resentment, which is one of the reasons, if you look at a band like Radiohead, they decided right from the very beginning that the songwriting credits were going to be divided equally amongst all of the members of the band. So You Really Got Me was a #1 hit in the UK, and #7 in America, #4 in Canada. All Day and All in the Night was a #1 hit, #2 hit in the UK, #7 in the US, #12 in Canada. You See What Tired of Waiting for You, it was a very different kind of song than they made before. Another #1 hit in the UK, #6 in the US, and #3 in Canada. Set Me Free, again, not at all like early hits. #9 in the UK, only #23 in the US. See My Friends, well, let me put it this way. The Kinks popularized Indian music, that is to say, dot, not feather, well, with the drone, before the Beatles and before the Velvet Underground. See My Friends reached only 10 in the UK and did not chart in the United States. And till the end of the day, well, we're back to rockers there. #8 in the UK, but only 50 in the United States. You see what happens when you get banned from the stage. A dedicated follower of fashion, I suppose you could say, is the beginning of the next phase of Ray Davis' songwriting, satirical social observation. It reached #4 in the UK and #36 in the US. Sunny Afternoon, which is about a rich man facing tax problems whose wife or girlfriend has run away, claiming abuse, and we don't know whether it's true or not. And it's a lovely day, and he's drinking his ice cool beer, not ice cold, but ice cool, because that's the way they like it in England. That was their last #1 for a long time, and it reached as high as 14 in the US. It's a funny thing looking at these charts, because a lot of songs that I remembered hearing on the radio as a child, I'd look at the standard Billboard books, you know, in later years. No, I didn't hear that on the radio because it never charted. Well, a lot of these songs charted in Canada when they did not chart in the US. Sunny Afternoon, for instance, was a #1 hit in Canada. Dead End Street, another brilliant piece of social observation, reached 5 in the UK, but only 73 in the United States. And Waterloo Sunset, which no less than Robert Christgau said was the most beautiful song in the English language, reached #2 in the UK, did not chart in America, but did reach, and it did not chart in Canada either, which is a surprise. A song called Wonder Boy, which a lot of people hate, which I love, only reached #36 in the charts in early 1968. And this was occasion for a crisis, because again, for the most part, more overwhelmingly, bands were making money off singles, and they were not making them off albums. That would come shortly, though. So what to do? What to do? They put out a song called Daze, which is another Stone Cold classic, which reached 12 in the UK, did not chart in America. And then they did very, very poorly in the charts for quite some time, again, until the big comeback, Lola, which was number 2 in the UK, number 9 in the US, and number 2 in Canada. Pretty much top 10 around the world, that was. Ray Davis was going through a lot of problems at the time that the Village Green Preservation Society came out. He was being sued by his manager, a notorious fellow, and basically he wasn't getting any money. He wasn't getting mechanical rights. He wasn't getting publishing rights, and it was a dire situation. He had a contentious relationship with his wife, Raisa, Baltic origin, who sang high harmonies on all their early records. And there was a lot of back and forth there. Eventually, she left him and took the kids, whereupon Ray Davis tried to kill himself. And there was the pressure from the band that it was like Roy Wood in The Move. Well, you write the hits. You're the man who writes the hits, so write us some hits. Your latest single has only come up to 36. Well, that means you're not doing your job. Now, it's not that easy to write hits, particularly when Ray Davis had decided that he wanted to do something a little different. Now, the previous album by the Kinks, called Something Else, well, that's a really outstanding record. It's got David Watts on it, and Death of a Clown, and Love Me Till the Sun Shines, and Waterloo Sunset, and Harry Rag. I mean, practically every song on that record could have been a single. And of course, as mentioned previously, it was considered cheating to put singles on your LPs. So bands would release albums, but they would release singles that were not later part of the albums. And one of those songs is called Autumn Almanac, which came out in October 1967. And it is a really remarkable song for a 23-year-old man to have written. It's really kind of shocking when you think about it, that it's about, it's about summer is over and the leaves have turned brown and it's raining, and Ray Davis just wants to hang around his neighborhood where he knows everyone. So Ray Davis was deep into this particular vein of social observation and of observations of England, particularly of an England that was disappearing, and an England that was reviled by all of the best people, not just people in the rock and roll business, but in the media and the politicians themselves. Everyone seemed to agree that the old England was vile and needed to be, destroyed is not too strong a word. Ray Davis did not come from the upper class, far from it, and he did not talk in a posh accent, but he was not a hater of the upper class, although he was certainly not ignorant of their failings. So the Kinks are the Village Green Preservation Society. There was a lot of trouble with putting it together. The Kinks would have done much better in England if they'd had a company like EMI and Decca or RCA for that matter, who they were later signed to. But no, they were with Pi. They signed a deal near the end of the 60s with Reprise, which is a very serious record label. And so there was a strange situation starting from 1969 when they were doing much better in America than they were doing in Britain. The Village Green Preservation Society album, it's been called a concept album. It isn't really. What it is a song cycle of, there's a feeling there, a particular type of feeling expressed in different ways, just to give you an idea of just how out of place this song was. At the end of 1968, I'm going to read you the lyrics. We are the Village Green Preservation Society, God Save Donald Duck, Vaudeville, and Variety. We are the Desperate Dan Appreciation Society, God Save Strawberry Jam, and all the different varieties. Preserving the old ways from being abused, protecting the new ways for me and for you, what more can we do? We are the Draft Beer Preservation Society, God Save Mrs. Mop and good old Mother Riley. We are the Custard Pie Appreciation Consortium, God Save the George Cross and all those who were awarded them. We are the Sherlock Holmes English-speaking vernacular, help save Fu Manchu, Moriarty, and Dracula. We are the Office Block Persecution Affinity, God Save Little Shops, China Cups, and Virginity. We are the Skyscraper Condemnation Affiliate, God Save Tudor Houses, Antique Tables, and Billiards. Well, one can't get much more out of step than that, I would have to say. Now, this album is, well, lyrically, it's about the end of youth, the end of a particular way of looking at one's life, one's position in the world. And a lot of the songs are wistful. A lot of them are sad, or even rather kind of angry. The second song on the album is called Do You Remember Walter? And it's about what happens when two school chums, they fall away from each other. I mean, that's typically what happens. Some people stay. Some people stay friends or close for the rest of their lives, but no, it's rare. And our narrator describes how they used to, play cricket in the thunder, in the rain, and how they were going to sail around the world, and how they were going to put the world to rights, because that's one of the things that young people want to do. Ray sings, if you saw me now, you wouldn't even know my name. I bet you're fat and married and you're always home in bed by 8:30. And if I talked about the old times, you'd get bored and you'd have nothing more to say. Yes, people often change, but memories of people can remain. The memories of people. There's two songs about photographs on this record. And one of them was used in an HP ad. And I don't think that HP understood the deeper meaning of the song. People take pictures of each other. As I say, that's one of them. But in this case, people take pictures of each other just in case someone thought they had missed it, and to prove that it really existed. People take pictures of the mothers, and the sisters take pictures of brothers just to show that they love one another. You can't picture love that you took from me when we were young and the world was free. Pictures of things as they used to be. Don't show me no more, please. Well, yes, it's a sad experience that, when one uses photographs or other memorabilia as a kind of fetish, and this idea that the past can be brought back. I mean, it certainly can remind one of the past. But again, people move on and they have their memories, but memories are distorted. So very often distorted. I'm sure that people, this often happens, that people come across a treasure trove of, pictures that were taken at a certain time, a certain event or whatever. And then they have an idealistic view of what the pictures will look like. And then they see the pictures and they think, was I really that spotty? Was my haircut really that bad? Were my clothes really that dire? Why do I have this ridiculous expression on my face? Etc. Picture book. Yes, picture yourself when you're getting on, sat by the fireside, pondering on picture book, pictures of your mama taken by your papa a long time ago. Picture book of people with each other to prove they love each other a long time ago. Picture book, your mom and your papa and fat old Uncle Charlie out boozing with their friends. Picture book, a holiday in August outside a bed and breakfast in sunny Southend. Picture book when you were just a baby, those days when you were happy a long time ago. Yes, I need evidence to prove that I was once happy. And again, Ray Davis was 24 years old when he wrote, actually a little younger when he recorded most of it. And these are really extraordinary sentiments for a man so young. There's all sorts of musical styles on this record. You get in the last of the steam-powered trains, you actually get the blues, because that's the kind of band that the Kinks started out as. And by that time, by 1968, with groups like Fleetwood Mac, Humble Pie, blues was beginning to turn into boogie, and you start hearing that. Nicky Hopkins, the legendary keyboardist, who played extensively with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, as well as the Kinks, is all over this record, playing piano, harpsichord, organ, and perhaps most memorably, mellotron, the magic mellotron. I love the mellotron. Although Robert Fripp once said, tuning a mellotron doesn't. It's an early form of sampler, not the first, but there's a bank of tapes, of recordings, and you play it with a keyboard, and you get flute effects, say, or violin effects, but no one's going to be fooled that this is really a flute or flutes or violin or violins. It's a unique effect. It's always icy, it seems to me, and that's one of the reasons why I like it so much. And so there is, I suppose you could say, Edwardian musical hall stuff. I mean, Ray Davis has been doing this for a couple of years now, and in my mind, much, much better than Paul McCartney, say, whose whimsy has always struck me as being forced. There is a flat-out rocker on the record called Wicked Anabella that Dave sings, and it's about a very nasty woman indeed. Let me give you some of the words. In a dark and misty house where no Christian man has been, wicked Anabella mixes a brew that no one's ever seen. Relatives have passed her by, too scared to even say hello. She's in perpetual midnight. She shuts out the day and goes about her sinful ways. I've seen her hair, I've seen her face look towards mine. I've felt her eyes burning my soul, twisting my mind. Little children who are good should always go to sleep at night, because wicked Anabella is up in the sky, hoping they will open their eyes. Well, you see the connection to childhood there, because it used to be the case, well, I don't know, for millennia, that adults would conjure, visions of terrible threats to children unless they did as they were told, and especially went to bed when they were told. And that's in that tradition. Now, the song Big Sky is something of a mystery because it's about, I don't know, is it about God? Is it about the insignificance of people on Earth? Or is it, that we're all equal because of that? Phenomenal Cat is, I don't know, you could call it a kind of novelty effort. It involves a speeded up voice, again by Dave Davis, and it's a strange tale A long, long time ago in the land of idiot boys, Peter Pan reference perhaps, there lived a cat, a phenomenal cat who loved to wallow all day. No one bothered him as he sat content in his tree. He just loved to eat because it kept him fat, and that's how he wanted to stay. Though he was big and fat, all the world was good to him, and he pointed out on the map all the places he had been. Cows, Sardinia, Kathmandu, the Scilly Isles, and Sahara too. Once when he was thin, he had flown to old Hong Kong and had learned the secret of life and the sky and the sea beyond. So he gave up his diet and sat in a tree and ate himself through eternity. A particularly good mellotron effort here. Again, you just see pretty much all of these songs can be seen as a looking back at childhood, which is in the way that this album is unified. The playing is, well, I think it's the best that the Kinks had played up to that time. And again, Nicky Hopkins' contributions are well, essential, really. It's hard to imagine this record without Nicky Hopkins' contribution. There are many different versions of this record, and there were many different versions right from the very beginning. Ray Davis wanted to make a double album like the White Album, and Pye Records said no. It's a shame that it wasn't a double album, because what we've had ever since then, particularly in the last 20 years, is that every reissue of a Kinks album has pretty much the same singles or outtakes on them. Well, 6 of one, half a dozen of another. You end up buying the same songs over and over and over again. But there was a 33 1/3 series book about this record, and it's for the series, excellent series, published by Continuum, that made the argument that you can't really look at the Village Green record, but in isolation of the songs like the remarkable Daze. Their record is Andy Miller wrote it. These are handsome little books, I must say, and it's highly recommended. What happens to a lot of bands is they run through a period where everything that they do is good. Everything they do is good. And of course, they often feel stupid for this isn't good enough for our record, or this isn't good enough for our single. And later they think, what were we thinking of? Are we going to get another song as good as that? For instance, there's a very strange song that was recorded at that time called Barkley Muse, which is about a kind of bitter, crapulous man looking back at this brief love affair with a woman who thinks she's a sophisticated and intellectual. And it has this hilarious line from it. I staggered through your shitty dining room. I love that. Now, there are songs that were legendary amongst Kinks fans because you couldn't hear them. Reprise put out a record called The Great Lost Kinks Album, and the Kinks had it suppressed. I suppose because there were songs on it they didn't want released, like Where Did My Spring Go, which is a very bitter attack on a woman for draining him dry. And even more remarkable is a song called When I Turn Out the Living Room Light, which can be regarded, you've been warned. People are going to be offended by this song. Well, for two reasons. That our narrator, and Ray Davis is always an unreliable narrator in his songs, or frequently, that he has to turn out the living room light because his his woman is Jewish, has a bulbous nose, has dry skin, knotty knuckles and all that sort of thing. But then later, it seems to be balanced out at the end of the song that the lights are turned off just as much to protect her from seeing him as the other way round. It's not a very romantic song, or perhaps one of the most unusual, or to me, glorious romantic songs. There are many, as I say, there are many different compilations. The Kinks missed the boat. The recordings, who owned the recordings, seemed to be up in the air for many, many years. At the time of Britpop, Damon Albarn and the like couldn't shut up about Ray Davis, and their records weren't available. It was a real own goal, but they keep being brought out in different versions and keep being remastered. I would go for a version that had as many extra songs as possible. You can find a lot of those songs on a compilation that came out on Reprise called the Kinks Chronicles, which is one of the best rock compilations. But those are some of my thoughts about the Kinks or the Village Green Preservation Society, which is nostalgic for me in two ways. Because it's nostalgic because I'm nostalgic about the time that I first heard it, but it also makes me nostalgic for an England that I never really knew, or that I only knew through books. It is an absolutely remarkable record, and it has my highest recommendation. What's coming up on the show? Just let me get there. Tomorrow is a Theater Thursday, and I'm going to be discussing, a Christmas movie. It is a Christmas movie in Britain. For some reason or another, this is, if not the most popular, people in Britain like to watch television on Christmas Day. And the top or second most popular is The Great Escape, which was directed by John Sturges, and it's not from 1963, which is based on a true story. And it was certainly one of my favorite movies when I was a boy, because it's got the sort of thing that a boy would like in it. And the fact that it has an unhappy ending, a desperately unhappy ending, that only made me like it more. And on Friday, the book club, I'm going to be talking about a book by Pierce Paul Reed. It's called Ablaze, and it's the true story of Chernobyl. Not like that TV show with Jared Harris. This is the real thing. Let's have a final look at the chat. O Come All Ye Faithful is sung in it, says Anra. Okay. Wasn't Lola a man also? That's ambiguous. That's a question from Texas Feral Hog. It's perfectly easy to read the lyrics and come to the conclusion that it isn't. But Ray Davis wrote many, many songs about yokels, if you will. About, he wrote a lot of songs from a female point of view, like Polly, for instance. The Big Black Smoke, the girl from, the country or the suburbs who wants to experience the big city and it doesn't go well. To a unsophisticated man, a vamp such as Lola. Let's assume that Lola is a female for the purposes of this story. With coal makeup and the like. It's going to be rather disturbing because, women tend to be fresh-faced, or they used to be fresh-faced, in the hinterland. Okay, Rod Stewart. Kinks versus Who versus Small Faces. I put the Kinks first. Small Faces, I'm tempted to put them second above the Who, because I find it difficult to put Pete Townsend. You know, you hear Tommy now after learning about the kind of man he is, and it's sickening, you know. Jules Roy has said Noel Gallagher has made pro-Brexit statements, and Ian Brown of the Stone Roses is now a much maligned anti-masker. Yes, I know about this, and good for them. Lutheran Drag Prayer Hour in Chicago, says Don Wallace. Yeah, we talked about that last week. Used cars just came on Hollywood Suite. Yes, I'm getting the Hollywood Suite channels for free temporarily. Used cars, man. Zemeckis, what he started off, he just hit the ground running. I want to hold your hand, and then used cars. My word, that is funny. Also, Kurt Russell. Okay, Morrissey versus Robert Smith. Yeah, I really like Robert Smith a lot, actually. It's funny, I saw him, he was in Toronto for some sort of music festival. This would have been in the 80s, the late 80s, say. And he typically has this huge mop of hair, right, which is all over the place. And he'd cut his hair short, and I thought, he looks remarkably like me. I'm not kidding. British American says surprisingly a lot of traditionalism, conservatism among British pop singers. Clapton, Tony Hadley of Spandau Ballet, Brian Ferry, Robert Palmer, the Kinks, even the Stones to some extent. Hello to Fassel Goose and Lindsay McNeely. Well, thank you for your kind words, Oscar Toe. Fu Manchu made another appearance with the Kinks lyrics tonight. Okay, I think I am going to wrap. Hello to Halper. Yeah. They had this show in Seattle called Almost Live, which was on King Channel 5. And it was so popular in Seattle that they delayed Saturday Night Live for 30 minutes. And they used to have this segment called The Lame List, featuring members of Seattle's heavy metal community. And one of them was Kim Thale in Soundgarden. This was before anyone had heard at Soundgarden, right? So they would, John Keister would list these things, and they would go lame. And one of them was that when that record came out, you know, Tough Boys, Rough Boys, Pete Townsend is gay. And it's horrified. Lame. That was very funny. Bill Nye started on that show, yes, and I can say I knew Bill Nye before anyone thought he was a scientist. He made things blow up in petri dishes and the like, you know, that kind of guy. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all for all your good wishes and contributions, particularly with this. It's always one thing, you know, or another. This snow thing came out of nowhere. Also, the no heat thing, that certainly came out of nowhere. But life is full of surprises, isn't it? So, again, thank you all for tuning in. Again, back tomorrow. As always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do really wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.